Welcome. In today's interconnected global economy, a company's success often hinges on something more than just its product. It's about how that product reaches the customer. And that, of course, is the domain of supply chain strategy.
That's right. We often think of supply chains as just logistics, trucks, and warehouses, but it's so much more. It's really a strategic weapon. So in our discussion today, we're going to explore how aligning supply chain strategy with broader business objectives is absolutely critical for competitiveness, for resilience, and ultimately for creating sustainable value.
Okay, so here's our roadmap. We'll begin with an introduction to strategic supply chains. Then we'll get into the foundational trade-off, efficiency versus responsiveness. After that, we'll discuss how value chains are structured, move on to the modern imperatives of risk and sustainability, and we'll wrap it all up with a synthesis and some key takeaways for management. All right, let's begin with Section 1. What exactly makes a supply chain strategic? And more importantly, how do we ensure it aligns with a company's overall objectives?
Well, to put it simply, a supply chain strategy is the organization's comprehensive plan. It's the blueprint that governs how you manage every single aspect of the chain, from sourcing raw materials all the way to final delivery. And the ultimate goal is always to support the overarching business objectives, to enhance competitiveness, and to build in the resilience needed to handle inevitable disruptions.
And that leads us directly to the foundational trade-off in all of supply chain design. It's this constant push and pull, this tug of war between cost efficiency on one side and market responsiveness on the other. How an organization navigates this balance really defines its entire operational approach. So, this is the core dilemma laid out. On one hand, you have a focus on cost efficiency. This is all about minimizing waste, driving down costs, and streamlining every process. It works brilliantly when demand is predictable. On the other hand, you have market flexibility. Here, the priority is adaptability, speed, and being able to react quickly to a volatile, changing market. Let's look at our first strategy, which is the lean supply chain. This is really the classic model for efficiency. Its core focus is the relentless elimination of waste in all its forms. The key feature, of course, is just-in-time, or JIT production, where inventory is minimized because parts arrive precisely when they're needed for assembly. The benefits are clear: lower costs and often higher quality. And the textbook example, of course, is Toyota. Their manufacturing system is still the benchmark for lean principles. Now, in complete contrast, we have the agile supply chain. This strategy isn't about cost, it's about flexibility and rapid response. It's designed for markets where demand is volatile and unpredictable. A key feature here is postponement, which means delaying the final configuration of a product until the very last minute. This allows a company to meet changing customer preferences incredibly quickly. The classic case study here is Zara in the fast fashion industry, which is famous for its ability to get new designs into stores with incredible speed.
So, our third operational strategy is the responsive supply chain. Now, you might think this sounds a lot like Agile, and it does share some traits, but the key difference is its proactive focus on adaptation. A responsive chain uses tools like predictive analytics to anticipate shifts and potential disruptions. It also often builds in redundancy, like having multiple production or distribution channels to ensure continuity. This is absolutely vital in sectors like pharmaceuticals, where a stockout is not just an inconvenience, it can be a critical failure.
This table really helps to crystallize the differences. If you look at the primary goal, you see lean targets cost efficiency, agile targets market flexibility, and responsive targets the service level. This aligns directly with the type of demand each is suited for: stable for lean, volatile for agile, and critical for responsive. And from there, all the other decisions, like inventory strategy and lead time focus, fall into place. The critical takeaway here for any manager is this: the nature of your market demand must dictate your operational strategy.
Okay, so we've covered the operational models. Now let's shift our focus to the architectural decisions. In this next section, we'll examine the fundamental choices a company makes when structuring its entire value chain.
Right. And this really comes down to one of the classic strategic questions in business: make versus buy. The choice is between internal control, owning and managing key stages of the supply chain yourself through vertical integration, versus leveraging external expertise by delegating functions to third-party specialists through outsourcing. It's a foundational decision with huge implications for cost, control, and flexibility. Let's first look at vertical integration. The core focus here is on gaining control. This strategy involves a company owning multiple stages of its supply chain, from raw materials right through to distribution. The major benefit is having much greater control over quality, costs, and delivery times. Apple is a prominent example of this, with its deep control over design, manufacturing processes, and its own retail network. The alternative strategy, then, is outsourcing. The focus here is on leveraging specialization. A company concentrates on its own core competencies, while delegating other functions like manufacturing, warehousing, or transportation to external partners who are experts in those areas. This can lead to significant cost reductions, access to specialized knowledge, and greater operational flexibility. We see this very commonly in the electronics industry, for instance. Now, there is a middle ground between those two extremes, and that is forming strategic partnerships. This isn't just a simple transactional relationship. It involves identifying key partners and then building deep collaborative ties. You're talking about protocols for information sharing, joint problem solving, and even co-innovation. A great example of this is in the automotive sector, where manufacturers and their key suppliers often have very close, long-term partnerships. All right, that covers the structural decisions. Now let's move into our fourth section, which deals with two modern imperatives that have become absolutely essential in today's environment: risk and responsibility. So a critical component of modern strategy is effective risk management, and the potential sources of disruption are numerous. We're talking about geopolitical instability, natural disasters, supplier failures, sudden and unexpected shifts in demand, or even regulatory changes. A truly strategic supply chain must be designed with these potential shocks in mind. So how do you mitigate these risks? Well, there are several key strategies. One is diversifying your supplier base so you aren't reliant on a single source. Another is maintaining strategic safety stock for critical components. You also need to develop robust contingency plans for various scenarios. And finally, investing in technology that gives you real-time visibility into your supply chain is becoming increasingly crucial. And that brings us to our eighth strategy, which is all about sustainability, or the green supply chain. This is no longer a peripheral issue, it's a core strategic imperative. This encompasses reducing carbon emissions, minimizing waste, using renewable materials, and ensuring ethical sourcing and fair labor practices throughout the chain. It's important to note that this isn't just about corporate responsibility, it's also good business. A company like Patagonia, for example, has built a powerful brand around these principles, demonstrating that sustainability can create significant competitive value. Let's move to our final section then, where we'll synthesize these concepts and look at the key takeaways from both a managerial and an academic standpoint. So, to summarize, we can think of the strategies we've discussed as fitting into three main categories. First, you have the operational focus. That's your lean, agile, and responsive models. Second is the structural design, vertical integration, outsourcing, and strategic partnerships. And finally, you have what we can call the modern overlays, risk management and sustainability, which now inform all the other decisions. Now, to help you prepare for your studies, let's consider a potential exam question. The first one asks you to compare and contrast the lean, agile, and responsive supply chain strategies. For each, you would need to provide a suitable industry example and, very importantly, justify your choice based on the market conditions of that industry. Here is a second question, this one focusing on those architectural decisions. It asks you to discuss the strategic trade-offs a manager must consider when choosing between vertical integration and outsourcing. This really gets at the heart of balancing control versus cost and internal capabilities versus external expertise. And a final potential question addresses those modern imperatives. Explain why risk management and sustainability are now considered essential components of supply chain strategy rather than optional additions. This requires you to think about how factors like global disruptions and changing consumer expectations have fundamentally reshaped strategic priorities. So, to bring our discussion to a close, the key takeaway is that the supply chain of the future is not just about being faster or cheaper. It must be smarter, more resilient, and more responsible.
Precisely. Ultimately, the design of a supply chain is a direct and powerful reflection of an organization's long-term competitive vision. Its strategic importance cannot be overstated. Thank you for joining us.